Hey girlies, just a quick reminder before we dive into today's episode. The information shared on this podcast is intended to be general sports nutrition advice and education related to period recovery for female athletes. This is not specific to any one individual, and it may or may not apply to your situation. If you are looking for personalized guidance, be sure to apply to our RBSN Period Recovery Nutrition Coaching Program. Our 4-month period recovery program is designed to help you sustainably get your period back and keep it. You can apply now to get started in our program, and we'll leave the link for the program below. If you're not quite ready for that one-on-one approach, that's exactly why we created the Period Recovery Guide. It's designed to support the girlies working on period recovery, specifically if you've lost it due to hypothalamic amenorrhea. The full Period Recovery Guide is finally out now, and we will leave all of the information for it in the podcast show notes. This is the Eat More Carbs Podcast. Hello and welcome back. This is the Eat More Carbs Podcast. It's Jenna here with Reilly. We are both dietitians and we talk every Thursday about sports nutrition for the girlies. Today, I'm actually giving a recap of my most recent marathon, which I ran just a little bit over a week ago now. So I'm going to be sharing all about that. We had a few requests about what that actually looked like and how that actually went for me. So spoiler alert if you haven't already read the title, but I'm going to be sharing all about like the marathon and how it went. Before we get into all of that though, we're going to do our high and low. So sharing about our week, the good, and maybe the parts we wish had gone a little bit differently. And then we're also going to be providing our training update. So Reilly is training for a half marathon and then eventually the marathon later this year. And I will just be sharing about kind of what life looks like not training anymore the week after a marathon. So Reilly, kick us off, high and low.
Before I do high and low, I am really excited about today's episode. I get to kind of grill you about your marathon. I feel like you're always asking me questions and now I'm excited to be asking you questions.
I can't wait. Let's get into it.
So my high and low are kind of the same story. So this past weekend was Mother's Day, which was my second Mother's Day as a mom. It's always fun. I'm not a big holiday person, so I don't really like to do anything super crazy, but it was really fun because we did go to the zoo, which Charlie loves the animals. Her nursery is animal themed and she just loves animals. Unfortunately though, halfway through the zoo trip, this is our low, she started not to feel great. On the way home, she threw up all over me.
Oh no.
Yeah, poor girlie got a little 24-hour bug. So it was a little bit of an up and down weekend, unfortunately, but she is feeling much better now, which is good. I used to be super throw up adverse. You throw up, I'm throwing up. And now I'm a mom and I'm I'm good. Bring it on.
I'm glad she's feeling better. If we're going to go there in the marathon, ask me about that because I think as not a mom, I maybe don't have that same ability to power through when I see throw up.
Oh no. Something happened during your marathon?
Yes, I'll get to all of that. I think it had a lot to do with conditions and all sorts of stuff. So I'll get to it for sure, but I'm glad Charlie's feeling better.
We're doing a lot better today in the Beatty household. How are you? How is your week after your marathon? Are you able to walk now? How's everything going?
Yeah, I think the first couple of days were pretty tough. Maybe that could be my low, is just how sore my legs were. I know I shared on last week's episode that I had to sit down to record this podcast because my legs were just so sore. It took a while before I felt ready to do anything, which is kind of hard because there's a lot of the rest of your body that feels ready for movement or excited to move again. It's a beautiful time of year here. So just wanting to get outside and enjoy the outside and knowing that I needed to prioritize rest was maybe my low because, my brain was probably ready for movement, but my body wasn't. And knowing how important rest and recovery are after a marathon and not wanting to push it is so important. The high of that though is that I did eventually feel ready for my first training session back after the marathon. And it just felt so good to move my body in a different way. And I'm really excited about this next kind of training block that I have, not being as much running based and kind of incorporating other types of movement that I really love to do. So I'm really looking forward to that. And that's my high. Kind of also my training update already, I guess. So spoiler on that.
I feel like we had lots of spoilers really quick in our high and our low. So why don't we just kind of jump into it? You ran the OC marathon. Tell us a little bit about why you chose that race and maybe give us a little bit of background on your race kind of history in the past. If you are new to the Eat More Carbs podcast, Jenna is our running specialist at RBSN within our period recovery program, and she is an avid runner herself. So why don't you share a little bit about kind of what your running journey looks like?
I'm going to take us really far back. So I apologize for anyone who doesn't really care that much, but I think it's important to the story. I actually started running when I was in first grade. I got into it because of my dad. My dad was really big into marathons and cycling, and I think that I caught the running bug just kind of early. So I wanted to get into that. I think the furthest I ever ran as far as from a club run perspective when I was younger was maybe 3 to 5 miles. That was considered a distance runner at that young of an age. And as I got a little bit older, I started to drift into other sports and found other things that I really loved, but I continued to run all through high school. When I got to my collegiate days, I wasn't really running that much, you could say. I was just doing it as more of a hobby. I stopped doing it from a competitive standpoint, but eventually I decided that I was going to run a half marathon. There were a couple things that kind of were like popping up in life where I decided that I needed a challenge and I needed a goal. I never really thought that I would be able to run a half marathon, being as the fact that most of my life I spent running shorter distances and focusing a lot more on speed than I was on distance. So it was a big challenge for me. And the first half marathon I ever ran, I didn't think I would ever run a marathon. I was like, I can't imagine doubling back and doing that again. But a half marathon was a really fun distance. So I started doing those. And that's really what became like my intro to kind of distance running. As time has gone on, I've kind of had an interesting relationship with running in the fact that like I wanted to train for something. Maybe I didn't. I wanted to get more into lifting. I wanted to try other things. Around the pandemic time, I really got back into running. Like so many other people, gyms were closed, studios were closed, and I needed kind of an outlet for activity. So I started running again, and at the time started running with my husband. And then that became something that we did together. Long story long that you didn't ask for. Last year we went to
asked for it.
This is like the full story. Last year we moved to Arizona and we needed to meet people. We needed to make friends. A lot of people recommend like run clubs as a place to do that. So we went to Run Club, and when we were there, a rep from the Rock and Roll series was there and was like, hey, your run club gets 50% off all race entry for a Rock and Roll series for the next 24 hours. Very impulsively, we not only signed up for a half marathon, but we signed up for the full marathon last year. And that was the first full marathon I've ever trained for and I've ever run. I kind of went into that with like no expectations as far as how it would go. It was really a challenging course. I knew nothing about the course map when I signed up. All I knew was that I was getting this race that was, usually $250, that I was signing up for $125. And we've talked about this before. I love a deal. I love a discount. So I was like, of course I'm going to run this race. Like, this is perfect. After running that, I think I kind of got into the mindset of, wow, if this is what it looks like when I'm just like trying to finish as my goal, what could I really accomplish if I had a goal of a pace goal, which is kind of bringing us to around 3-4 months ago when I decided that I really wanted to run sub 325 for a marathon, which is a really big goal considering that the first marathon I ever ran, you can look up all my times, you can look up all my splits, but my first marathon I ran at a 342, which is amazing. That's great. I felt like I hadn't tried from a pace perspective and I really didn't really know what to expect. So I was just out there running, but I figured if I really tried and pushed speed workout and kind of paired that together with my distance training and everything that I knew from the past marathon, I felt like it was possible. That was kind of the goal walking into this. If you've looked at the title of this episode, you know that I didn't run a sub 325, which is hard because my time that I finished with was still really good. And I'm still really proud of it. And it was still a PR, but it wasn't the time that I wanted it to be. So before we get into like some of the questions, I just want to say, if you are going through period recovery, if you're working on a goal, if you have something that you really, really want to achieve and it's not happening right now, I feel that. Like, I relate to that so strongly of like having a goal that not only do you want so badly, but you want so badly right now. And it's so hard to work so hard and put in all the work and then not really see the outcome that you were potentially hoping for. But it's so important to celebrate the wins along the way and look at everything that you've accomplished. I mean, gosh, if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I ever thought I would run a marathon, I'd have been like, absolutely not. So all of the things that I've accomplished from that point until now, I ran a marathon, and like that's still a big accomplishment, even if it wasn't the time that I was hoping for, and even if the race really didn't end up going the way I wanted it to.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I think it's so easy right now with social media and instant gratification, like you mentioned, where you get into something and you're like, hey, I've been like a lifelong runner, but before you were training for smaller distances, you were doing track and field, and you're like, well, I'm getting back into running again. Like, this will be easy. Like, I'll be fine. And it takes a little bit longer than we think it does sometimes.
I think it definitely takes longer than we kind of think it will with some of the time goals that we have, because I can hold the pace that I wanted to hold for multiple miles. If you read all the forums online and it says, if you can hold your race pace for 10, 13, 15 miles, you're going to be just fine. And so I'm like, yes, you're right. I'm going to be just fine. But sometimes it doesn't really play out the way you want it to on race day.
I think this goes back to your point relating this back to period recovery, where if you look at some of maybe the generic information online, it may or may not apply to you. And every situation is going to be different. Just like every single race day is going to be different. Every single training block is going to be different. You can be doing all of the right things. It just might not be in the cards for you that day. And that's totally okay.
Yes, exactly. And so many factors kind of kind of play into whether or not you end up having like a perfect day or a perfect training block. And so many of those factors are external. For example, the race that I picked it because it's a net downhill course, but I didn't know the last 5 miles of the race were a gradual uphill. That was something that was kind of a surprise to me. Later on, I know that it's really important to like look at the course map, figure it all out. And there were 2 large incline hills earlier in the race, but this slow gradual uphill, I was like, oh, that's not going to be a problem. That's not something that like I really anticipated being anything that would impact that race for me. And it was. So there are so many things that like we just don't really expect.
So let's take a couple of steps back. You chose the OC Marathon because like you mentioned, it was kind of a net downhill race. Talk to us a little bit or share with us a little bit about your preparation for this race. How long was your training block? What did training look like? Any challenges, any wins that came out of training?
Race was the first weekend in May. I started really seriously training for it in like the middle of January. And training for me meaning like every long run Saturday was kind of planned out from that point on. And my focus switched from a lot more like weight-based training in between my sessions to a lot more like shorter run sessions or speedier sessions or things like that. So that's kind of like the timeline. I think the biggest setback for me was injury during this time period. I wasn't really as healthy as I wanted to be. I got sick a few times. And then I've also been dealing with a little bit of some like leg injury and leg pain. And so for a couple points in time, I had to like miss the exact training sessions that I wanted to do. And then one run in particular, it was a 20 miler that I had not long before the actual race. I had to stop. I had to Uber home because the pain in my leg were so bad. And I wanted to push through, but my husband was like, this isn't the race. Like, this is not an important day. And wouldn't you much rather go and like actually run the race and try versus like push through this and hurt yourself more? So that was a really hard like mental hurdle for me to get over because everything was supposed to be like mock race day with when I'm taking my fuel, what I ate that morning, what time we started and all that sort of stuff. And it didn't work out. And so I was really nervous about the race, I think, because I didn't have that practiced out as much as maybe I wanted to. That was really, really hard. But the good thing about this training block was that I could see myself actually getting faster. Whereas the first time that I ever trained for a marathon, my training was a lot like, okay, I have 18 miles today and the goal is just to finish.
Something that we see a lot with our athletes in our period recovery program is this idea that they want everything to be perfect. But when we look at nutrition, I feel like similar to running, there's this perfect and idealistic way that things are going to go. And there's those things that are realistic, right? We can't plan for everything, especially things like injury. If there are athletes listening who are maybe struggling with that ideal of being perfect versus realistic with running or with their period recovery journey, what tips do you have for those athletes?
I'm going to share what my husband shared with me, talking about whether or not I had belief in myself to accomplish this goal. I know that you can do this. I know that you have a sub 325 in you, but you need a perfect day right now based on everything that's happened in order for it to happen. The likelihood of having a perfect day is a lot lower than maybe we want it to be. But that doesn't mean that what you're doing doesn't matter or doesn't count or doesn't like mean you can achieve something, because I know for sure you can PR. It just might not be the PR that you're looking for today, but that doesn't mean that there won't be other opportunities to get the PR that you want. And I think that like helped kind of me put it into perspective that like you don't just have one chance to meet your goal. And just because you've set a really big goal and maybe it doesn't play out the way that you want it to that time, that doesn't mean that you won't have another opportunity to make it again.
I love this. Sometimes our goals have to change. If your goal is to get your period back in 3 months and you haven't gotten it back in 3 months, like let's make it 4 months. Like let's just adjust the goal and learn from maybe the changes that you made that weren't as successful.
Yeah. The biggest thing for me was my own self-doubt and whether or not I was letting that impact my ability to try. Because I think that that's our biggest limiting factor when it comes to the goals that we set, is the doubt that whether or not we can actually accomplish something. And that can really stand in our way as a barrier. So the morning of race day, I woke up. We were lucky enough that our hotel was quite literally right at the start line. But I knew that no matter what, I wanted to try for my goal. So I knew that I needed to push the pace. That meant the whole time. It wasn't like I was going to show up the morning of the race and go, you know what? I think I've got a race in me that's still a PR, but it's not necessarily a 325. I knew that I had that in me, but I thought, I don't want to walk away from this and go, you know what? I wonder what it would have been like if I had just tried. because my self-doubt was going to like take over and say, you know what, just adjust the goal from the start and see what happens. No, I just wanted to try. I still wanted to try. And for about 21 miles, I held that pace. I looked at my husband around mile 21 and I said to him, I got this. Like, I felt so confident in the fact that this was going to go the way that I wanted it to. But unfortunately, my body had other plans. And I don't think it had anything to do with my nutrition up until that point. I think I did really good practicing what types of gels that I was going to take, when I was going to take them, the water, everything like that. I had really done like a very diligent job of making sure that that was planned out to a way that was going to support my goals. If you didn't follow along on Instagram, I tested a whole bunch of different gels as far as what was the easiest to open, what did I like best, what felt best for me. And I ended up using the BPN gels. I used both the caffeinated and the non-caffeinated, and I used different flavors to kind of help with flavor fatigue and help me get something down. Even though I'm not someone who's like gel adverse, I know Reilly, gels are not your favorite intra-run fuel. It still gets hard to take them, especially when you're taking so many. So even if you are someone who's like, yeah, gels aren't that bad, you never know what it's going to look like in race day when your body's fatigued, you're fatigued, and you're opening your 5th, 6th, maybe 7th one, and you're like, gosh, I can't believe I have to take another one of these. So for me, switching up flavors helps with that side of things.
Talk to us a little bit about race day. So what did race day look like? What time did the race start? What was your progression? How were you feeling during the race? You shared a little bit about it just then, but would love to hear about maybe how you prepared in the morning.
Race start was at 5:30 in the morning, which is a really early race start. I wanted plenty of time to eat my breakfast, drink plenty of fluids, and then get out to the start line with like minutes to spare before it started. And that's kind of exactly what we did. My husband and I got up and kind of started everything with breakfast and coffee and water and all of that sort of stuff. And then we walked out to the start line around 5:25, walked out there, walked into my corral, and then pretty much went. So time from, start of race to my chip time crossing the start line was not that long. I didn't have a long time that I needed to wait outside and like feel cold. The race itself, the course was beautiful. Like the Southern California, Orange County area, what a gorgeous place to like get to run through. You have beautiful architecture on one side and ocean views on the other. So like couldn't ask for a better like place to run through. The weather was a little bit chillier than we had anticipated as far as from time of year. High 40s, low 50s when we started, and it was overcast and kind of misty the whole day. For me, that's kind of perfect temperature. I tend to overheat. So I was really excited that we were going to have cloud coverage the whole day. Like I said, kind of the first several miles, I held pace. The interesting thing about marathons, which if you've run one, they're all longer than 26.2. So I kind of already had an anticipation that this race was going to be long because Garmin watches started buzzing first, then my watch would buzz, and then I would pass the mile marker sign. So my chip time still looked like 7:30-ish, maybe 7:45-ish for my time, which was still under goal pace. So I was good with that, but I already had the anticipation that like this was going to be a long one, that my watch was going to tell me that I was much further ahead than where I actually was. So that's a really important thing to kind of keep in mind when you are working towards a goal race, is that you need to be mindful of when your tracking device is telling you you're crossing a mile marker and when you actually are passing that mile marker. And then mile 21, when we started that like slow, gradual uphill, that's when the 3:25 pacer really kept going and I did not keep up with them. So I had kind of settled into a good pace that was between 3:25 and 3:30. 3:30 was running really fast. I had started behind the pacers and caught up. So I knew I was under the 3:25 at that point in time and felt good, settled in with like keeping with that one. And then at a certain point, my legs were just like, hey, those nagging injuries that you've had, they're just going to start to spark and you're not going to feel great. And at that point in time, it was really hard to kind of accept that my body was done, but I knew that my goal needed to change. So just like a goal change, like you mentioned, period recovery, if it doesn't come back in 3, like what does it look like when we change the goal to 4 months? And I just said, okay, this isn't in the cards for me right now. I know that my pace is going to start to slip. So like, what can I do? What can I hold on to? How can I change this goal? And then the goal at that point was just to finish and just to give it everything that I had and walk away knowing that like I couldn't have done any more. In those moments when I knew I was just like fighting, I needed to remind myself once the race finished that like this was so hard and I was still trying to give it everything that I had, because I knew it would be really easy to look back once I had finished and been like, what would it have been like if I had just kept like kept pushing through like super hard, but I just didn't have that in me. And at that point, there stopped being as many water stations. There were a lot of people standing outside of their houses passing out water and apple juice because I think that they noticed that runners were having a really hard time. And multiple people started getting sick on the course. There was a girl, she and I were kind of running right next to each other. I know that her goal was the same as mine, and she just pulled off and got sick. And Nolan was like, don't look, just don't look at it. Because he was like, I knew at that point, if you looked, like you were going to get sick too. So we had multiple people that were peeling off and getting sick. So having unfortunate Charlie-like scenarios, thankfully I made it through. I think the hardest thing was when the 3:30 pacers passed me and my watch told me that at that point it was like, congratulations, you finished a marathon. And I was like, I'm nowhere close to the finish line. So I knew I had quite a bit more distance to go despite my watch thinking that I had done a phenomenal job. So I ended up crossing the finish line at around a 3:32, which was still something that I'm really, really proud of, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. And that's okay. Like, what a great accomplishment for a marathon. And I shouldn't be upset about that. No, I didn't meet my goal, but like, that doesn't mean my goal is not attainable for me in the future. It just means that it wasn't this race that it happened.
Well, I'm so proud of you.
Oh,
like,
thanks.
I feel like so many people would have like just given up. Like they're like, it doesn't matter because like I'm not going to meet my goal. Like I feel like you could have really easily given up or even decided like not to run the race. Like I know you and I have talked a lot offline about this, and you could have easily been like, nah, it's not for me. Like we had even talked about like maybe you just run the half, and you were like, no, that's a horrible idea, Reilly. Like no, I'm going to run the marathon.
Sometimes you just have to try. It might not work out. And that's okay. It's okay not to meet your goals, and it's okay to adjust the goal. I still did something that I wanted to do. I can't be mad about that.
You still PR'd.
Yeah. I had somebody that actually messaged me after the race, which she had competed in, I believe she did both the 5K and the half marathon. And I had posted something about like, it wasn't how I wanted it to go, but like, thanks to everyone who wished me luck. And she was like, you still finished a marathon. And she's like, what a great day it is to like be able to like go out and run. And I was like, oh man, she's so right. You're always living someone else's dream. How many people were, you know, me 10 years ago crossing that half marathon line going, I could never do that. I could never run a marathon. You can do so much more than you're capable of, and you're always living someone else's dream.
We've talked about this a lot with period recovery, but comparison is sometimes a thief of joy. Like you just said, you did a marathon, like you PR'd, you completed a marathon. Again, even if you didn't PR, like you completed a marathon, and that is such an amazing goal and an accomplishment. And I think it's just so easy sometimes to compare ourselves to others. And I'm not saying you specifically, but I think sometimes like, especially like I fall guilty of this, is like I go online and I look at what other people are running those times and or what other people, you know, are up to. And then I start to feel really like negative on myself when it's like, you're not doing that bad.
Right. The whole reason that I like to run is that it's me versus me. But I do think that comparison gets the better of me sometimes when I go online and I see people are like, just ran my first marathon at sub 3. And I'm like, that's amazing that they did that. That's absolutely incredible. But I start to compare myself because I'm like, I've been running for so long. Why isn't this happening for me? And it's like, well, you first ran, you know, your first marathon a year ago. Like you're still new at that distance. And yes, I know a lot about running because I've been around running for so long. But for me personally, and what my body knows, it's more familiar with maybe a half marathon, maybe a 10K, maybe something shorter than it is a marathon. And so I'm still new at this, and I need to give myself some grace because what I did is still a great thing and still something that I should be proud of and celebrate.
Well, I'm proud. I was so stressed on that whole day. Like everybody who was around me like knew you were running the marathon because I was having secondhand stress because I was like, I hope she finishes. I hope she doesn't get hurt. Like, I hope she's happy. Like, all this stuff. So it is an amazing accomplishment.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone who reached out and asked me to share about this. I don't really think that I would have if we didn't have such an amazing like RBSN community and Eat More Carbs community who were just like so open to us being vulnerable and sharing like the good and then also the parts we wish had gone differently. I'm so proud of what I did. I don't think that anyone on this podcast is going to judge me for not meeting my goal because I think we've all probably set a goal before and we all know what that feels like.
Yes. And also too, like you trained hard for 5 months, right? And I think that's one of the hardest parts about the marathon. It's not even necessarily the race. It's like the training and the fueling and all of that mental challenge and those mental hurdles that you have to go through with training.
Yeah, because there are definitely days when you have to rely more on dedication than you do motivation.
Same thing as period recovery.
One thing that you can pretty much like guarantee when you have big goals is that the journey will be tough, but the reward will be worth it. Speaking of training being one of the hardest parts, what is training looking like for you?
So I'm currently on week 6 of my 11-week block. Last week was week 5, which was a deload week. This week I'm ramping up my mileage again, and I've also ramped up my strength training. So that was really what my goal was this training block, is just to be able to consistently run 20 to 30 miles and be able to strength train 2 to 3 times per week. So that's really what I'm focused on right now in preparation for starting my marathon training come July. So this week, again, just kind of doing some interval work, trying to get faster, just really trying to have time on feet, and then just really incorporating that strength training. So we'll see how it goes. It is always fun for me to have something to focus on and something to train for. It just gives me a little bit more purpose with my workouts.
You have a PR goal for your half marathon. How are you feeling about that?
So interesting that you bring this up, because I feel like there's a lot of that you mentioned, I guess that goal setting that you mentioned, I really resonate with a lot of that, because if I get sub 135, I will PR. It's been really interesting because I'm using Runna, and Runna will tell you a goal. It gives you a 5K goal, a 10K goal, a half marathon goal, and your marathon goal. So basically it says, like, if you were to run a half right now, a full right now, this is what your time would be. And then at the end of this training block, this is what your predicted time is going to be. Runna is telling me that I can run a sub 133, which I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I will report back. And it's just so interesting because I'm like, oh, if I get sub 135, I will PR. But then, like, of course, now Runna's like, well, if you can get a 133. And I'm like, well, now I need to beat that. And it's like, you just need to, like, not get hurt, Reilly, at this point.
I love that your goal, though, is the sub 133.
It's been really nice, not to get sidetracked on my goals. I have finally been able to really start training again after being postpartum. I have not been able to train the way that I've wanted to train for so long. I really couldn't run when I was pregnant just because of some complications. And I've really starting to feel like my old self again with, like, the running and the lifting. And it's just been really nice to, like, start kind of feeling like my prepartum self, I guess you could say. It's just nice to have some goals again.
I'm so happy for you. I know that that's something that's, like, really, really important to you. And it's really, really important that, like, you feel like yourself in addition to being a new mom.
Well, thanks. And I resonate with a lot of the things that you shared, like I did mention, because even if I don't PR, like, really getting focused on the training and some of the stuff, I'm gonna have to re-listen to this episode just as a good reminder. What are your goals right now? What are you you said you were kind of dabbling in a couple of other areas of training that you're interested in after this marathon?
I haven't picked another race yet. I'm just kind of, like, seeing how things go right now. We're recording this on the 12th. I ran on the 5th. So really haven't had that many days off from running, but I haven't run yet. And the reason for that is, like, we've been talking about this whole episode, is that, like, I kind of have this high hamstring situation. So anything that I am doing for training right now is very specific to make sure that it doesn't hurt and it doesn't kind of, like, re-injure or re-aggravate that kind of nagging situation that I currently have going on, which is so lovely. But the hardest part, just like I shared at the beginning with my low, is just, like, the rest of me feels ready to run and so excited to get back into running again. But I know that it's really important that I take this time specifically to kind of make sure that, like, I'm good to go when I do decide to start a training block again.
That actually makes me really happy to hear, because I remember doing an episode on this podcast a year ago about your San Diego full, and you shared that you, like, were like, I don't ever want to run again. Like, I'm so sick of running. And it's really exciting to hear that, like, even though you're not ready to run now, you are excited to run again in the future.
Yeah. And it's not that I'm not ready to run. Like, I'm ready to run, but my body said, slow down. We need you to take time to rehab this so that way I can come back stronger. But that's the most important thing, is that reminding myself that it's me versus me. But in order to show up that way, I have to be the healthiest version. And that includes maintaining my cycle, making sure that my hamstring's okay, making sure I address my feet, because my gosh, I don't know if I can deal with another blood blister and, like, all that sort of stuff. So speaking of, oh my gosh, how are your toenails and your Novablasts?
Okay, this is kind of a funny story and was actually going to be one of my like high and low combos. So I started wearing the Novablast, which I really like. And Jenna, I actually think you might like them too, because they have a really wide toe box.
Ooh, okay.
And I think it might be helpful for your blisters. I have been not laughing, because I feel like such a dum-dum. I got sized and I think I was wearing too small of shoes. Before people come for me and say, how could you make that mistake? I have a soccer player background, and when you're playing, you usually want smaller shoes so that you can have more control, right? You don't want to have any room in your shoe. And I've just always been training like that my entire life. So of course, I'm looking for a more like snug running shoe. I usually go up like half a size, but I probably needed to go up an entire size because I wear about a 6.5, 7, and I got a Novoblast in an 8.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's quite a difference for you.
And I've done a couple of runs in them and they actually have worked, and I haven't really had like any toe pain. And again, it wasn't like super painful. I just was losing my toenails, which
fun. Are they growing back? Are you going to be able to get them painted?
Yes, I am going to get them painted. One is not looking good. One is just on the struggle bus, but at least I should be able to get 2 out of the 3 painted.
We'll take that.
We will take that. But again, like, right, you either win or you learn, right? So now I know, and I would have never known before. And again, I was doing fine in my shoe. I just was having some toenails fall off, but I couldn't really feel it. It wasn't that big of a deal. So, but now I know.
I'm glad you're in the right size shoe, and I'm excited to hear your continued training in your new shoes. And I'm thankful that you have the right fit.
Talking about things that we're thankful for, I'm really thankful that you shared on this episode. I know this will be really helpful for a lot of runners and just athletes in general who might be going through period recovery or just striving for certain goals when it comes to athletics.
If anyone has questions about my race, anyone has questions about time splits, anything like that, like I am more than happy to share. If you have questions for Reilly and I about running, about period recovery, about goal setting and what's realistic for goal setting for period recovery, please reach out to us. You can always leave comments on this podcast episode, or you can find us online. You can find Reilly at easy.sports.nutrition, and you can find me at jenna.fisher.nutrition. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Eat More Carbs podcast. Please make sure you rate, subscribe, and review. And as always, remember to eat more carbs.